Good evening and welcome to tonight's public lecture hosted by the Department of Architecture here at UVA. It is an honor for me to introduce Marcelo Faiden to UVA tonight. Based in Buenos Aires, Marcelo is a partner of Adamo-Faiden Architects. Along with Sebastián Adamo, Marcelo has, over the last decade and a half, built a prolific body of work that in a very subtle manner transforms the quotidian into the fantastic. From the readaptation of an old bull's hut into a domestic space to a heavyweight featherweight game in the design of a floating pavilion, the work negotiates a powerful line between invention and commonality. Commonality understood as something that is common, collective, and shared by all. It is within the realm of collective domestic space where this dialogue becomes most powerful. Through the design and development of small-scale, multi-unit housing projects, the office has built on the Latin American tradition of the joint freehold trust, which is my best attempt to translate the concept of the fideicomiso de propiedad horizontal. In doing so, Adamo-Faiden have significantly altered the landscape of contemporary housing in metropolitan Buenos Aires. In addition to his professional work, Marcelo has taught extensively in Buenos Aires and abroad, more recently at the Princeton School of Architecture. He has also developed many applied research projects. A favorite of mine is Los Bajos de los Edificios Altos, the ground floors of tall buildings. In Spanish it rhymes, so it's better. Unfortunately, it doesn't rhyme in English, which asks a fundamental architectural question. How do tall buildings meet the ground? The work of Adamo-Faiden aligns perfectly with many of the interests and aspirations of our department and our curriculum. Chief among them, the idea that we can meaningfully contribute to society through the lens of an aesthetic project. While tonight's lecture is open to the public, it is also tightly linked to our second-year undergraduate studio, coordinated by Maria González Aranguren and Jose Ibarra, that centers around the theme of collective housing. And after the lecture, we are very much looking forward to a conversation on your work, Marcelo, as it relates to the studio and to our very own pedagogy. Marcelo, welcome to UVA.
Thank you, Felipe. Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I remember when you contacted me, you first asked me to center this presentation in collective housing. That was the topic that Jose and Ibarra and Maria González Aranguren were working with. So I take that corset for this presentation in a good way, but I did a little exception, and I call it dwelling essays. That's the lecture name. So let me share the screen for a moment. Here we are. So for me, dwelling is a more open term than housing. It creates different images in your head, at least. And I think the idea of dwelling essays allows me to put together a constellation of different scale projects that maybe as a whole can describe a way to live in the contemporary city. So the first project I want to share with you is not just a project, but not just a building, but it's actually a description of a territory. I'm focusing right now not just in this pavilion I want to share with you, but in those infrastructure left over, those let me call it plots floating in the air, that for us were privileged places, clearly in relation to the sky, which is the only natural element you can find in this dense fabric. So that's the place we choose to build our version of the Loggia primitive hut, but not in the natural soil, but on top of the city, surrounded by it, but without urban references. So the pavilion steps back from the edge of the building and creates a perimeter of plants that filter the light, and it has the same structural design for the interior and the exterior. It's an open plan that is related to urban hedonism with no specific use, just because the existence organization already solved that problem. So that's the plots I'm talking about are around here. It's for us, it's a territory for creative reason, freedom, without the speculative corset of the traditional urban plots. So the pavilion is like the roof that the existing house never had, a roof made of air, that using the urban fabric as our heartcraft, finding a new topography, being in the middle of Pampas plain. So the pavilion creates an inclinated roof, and again, the typical program of the house already exists. Over here, you can see it. So this is about adding a very big room with no specific use, structured by 3 patios. So there's a patio on the left and another one in the front. A metal mesh and the glass dilutes the interior from the exterior, the same concrete floor, the same steel structure, to create an atmosphere related to the interior of a city block, that you can find it reflected in the transparencies or in the reflections. The discontinuity of the city fabric could be an opportunity to try to capture a big amount of air, using every party wall accident as a node to find a specific geometry for this permeable roof that protects you from the sun while creating intimacy in an outside room, made with a very cheap agricultural plastic mesh. So changing the way we refer to things can be a powerful design technique. Once you uncover a former water tank, you can call it an air swimming pool. And just like this, the second after, you can enjoy your neighborhood in your environment in a very new way. When elements share responsibilities, everything becomes lighter. So that glass room can exist only because of the shadow device on top of it. So we also had the chance to test these same ideas, the same materials, the same programs, now working not just on top of an existing building, but by side to it, next to it, and also below it, as you can see. This is the existing house, and this is our project. So we are moving this kind of essays from one place to another, the same material, the same unprogrammed rooms. So taking away the obsolete machines and their big room to connect the street to the garden. By adding a 9 feet deep pavilion to improve the circulation of air, but also the circulation of people, to connect different gardens. So finally, that's the pavilion that can contain the existing pool, that can create a porch and also an open air terrace. So this is far away from Buenos Aires in a productive landscape. Two infrastructure pavilions for feeding bulls and cows. That's a new essay for the same room. I'm moving it from top to the side, but now inside an existing building. In this case, bridging two pavilions to transform this infrastructure into a house. So once you cross the patio to take the stairs, take a look to Pampas Plain and get inside this kind of loggia. It's a pavilion that already count with 4 towers that are transformed into bedrooms and bathrooms. And then, once again, a single open space with radially arranged beams in order to dilute these 3 parts into one continuous place. So this is the last iteration of these rooms that this time happens under an old house. This was the existing relation that the house had with the garden. The typical relation that the houses had from in the 19th century, beginning of the 20th, like it's from the patio nobile. It's a distant relation with nature, very contemplative relation. So in order to create another dialogue, we took again the obsolete basement that was full of service rooms and a lot of ancient rooms that was made of a massive load wall made of brick. So that was the new opportunity to create a new contract between the house and the existing garden. So we literally cut the house in this point. You can follow our intervention by looking to this C-shaped structural beam that only touches the ground in the main entrance stairs. Then create space for storage and services behind the corrugated metal panels. Well, for example, this side garden was a former asphalt driveway down to the mechanical workshop and the driver's bedroom. We are talking about a 1912 house that, for Argentina point of view, it's very, very old building. So that's the horizontal cut once again here that tries to create an horizontal relation with the garden, a physical relation. So again, the same multi-purpose room, mostly on program, the same materials, the same concrete floor, the same white walls, the same lightness, but of course, super rhetoric in this time. This lightness is not real. The house it's a heavy weight, but the idea of creation of creating a sensation of a marquee out of it create this floating and light image. So these 3 next cases are finally built from head to toe. They are not using another building to exist, but they share one thing, that the 3 of them share a plot with an existing building. So that's why maybe this group of small pavilions are forced to take a different position to the context. In this case, turning the architecture 90 degrees, putting its back from the party wall in order to create a new corner. So it creates a covered entrance while elevating the main rooms of the new house. Elevating some plans too, while creating a safety device, but sensual device. So it is rotated from the street alignment to catch the best views and to catch the best light. The interior could be a new itinerance of the previous room I've been talking about. It's a big portion of air where furniture plays a very important role to define the use of it. And the last room, we are going to talk to see some variation of this kind of room. It's an open air observatory to the city. So this second pavilion, it's a construction that occupies the front patio of a small factory that still works at the back of the plot, owned by the same families that live in these two houses. So the ground floor is divided by two entrances, one for the factory and this one with the stairs, exterior stairs to entrance the houses. So that stairs connect the garden, the houses, and the terrace, using the trees as an internal wall, or once again using a very light and cheap envelope. That facade climbs up to the top to create again the same room, a way to look at your environment in a different way. So the last of those small pavilions that share the plot with an existing building, it completes a corner house, bringing it more space, creating a patio, creating a terrace on top of the existing roof, creating a pool as a roof. So bringing more leisure programs to it. The building has maybe a strong personality. You can see that it speaks in its own words, but it's capable of creating a specific relation to its environment. It moved back from the party wall in order to continue to make some continuity with the existing patio, and also moving or taking the lines of its predecessor. So that's the patio I'm talking about, the new patio, the new exterior place for the house. That's a photo taken from the roof of the existing house that directs to a glass pavilion that has again, one more time, the swimming pool and the city from above. So moving from the ground to the sky through architecture. So I am repeating different idea, maybe an agenda of how to dwell the city of Buenos Aires. And maybe at this moment you start to feel like a little deja vu, because the projects start to mix with one with the other, but not only between the buildings of the studio or fragments of the building of a studio, but maybe others people work too, or other references for instead in this image the modern curtain wall is over there. So the last studio me and Sebastian taught at University of Buenos Aires, it was a few years ago now. It was a postgraduate studio that was called Workshop for Project Technique Actualizations. So the main ideas behind it is that the project is a form of knowledge. That's pretty obvious, but it's good to say it loud once in a while. Another thing is that you can learn and use other architects' design techniques, knowing that they won't fit perfectly in your present scenario. So that little differences produce a small forward movement rooted in the discipline, but fueled in the day-by-day contingencies. So of course, nowadays we know how important it is to protect the glass from the sun. And when you do that, you deploy or you separate those things in two, and the whole composition changes because you are start to create a new relation to the exterior. As I mentioned before, Buenos Aires need some kind of safety devices if you want to have a fully glass building. So that creates also an opportunity to show to the city some translucent intimacy of the domestic space by creating different relations between two elements, the filter or the certi device, whatever you want to call it, but putting one thing away from another like 3 feet, and then moving that distance to 4 feet, putting very together one with another in one place, and then taking away the glass, so you can look through it and see the same landscape, the same ordinary landscape, but in a more special way. But most important is that you can, through it, you can activate the circulation of the air. That's another important thing when you want to give big rooms. It's not just the walls, it's not just the envelope, it's the quality of the air that you offer. So the air, of course, can be a design subject. You can add humidity to it by adding elevated gardens, and you can add also aroma. So focusing in the design of the air, you could have an argument to rearrange all the things that you already know, to study all over again in a different way. But it's not that we are forgetting about solid element. We are responsible for that solid element, for that slab, for that wall, for that window. But we are becoming back to them with a different perspective, with a different point of view that makes more easy to simplify things. This perspective is a beautiful, for us, very beautiful shortcut to structure, to circulation, and to envelope of the building. That's where our office is. As the facade of the garden dilutes itself with the trees of the city block patio. Only few times we produce big models like this one here. We did it for the Chicago Biennial, the version curated by Shostor Markli that was called Make New History. They asked a group of architects to select a building. It could be outside Chicago, but choose one building and try to create a model that combines your interest, your agenda with it. Of course, because the biennial is in Chicago and we knew that nobody will take the John Hancock, we did it. We love that building. We love it because we studied too much. For me, it's a piece of the vertical city of Hilbersheimer did. If you pay attention to the section of it, you have the cars, you have the office space, you have the apartment on top of it, and it was designed by his former student Bruce Graham at IIT. So that gradient of distances between the core and an envelope, a building divided in 3 parts, let us construct this exploded mastaba. We took one slab from the parking, one slab from the offices, another from the apartment, and use the original structure to taste or think again about the evolution of housing, about how working is changing, and how mobility can be think in a different way. So we try to mix productive hydroponics inside domestic landscapes. We superimpose a co-living scheme in Hancock's organization. We reinterpreted the 60 modular office furniture system, including leisure as one new important element, or try to blur the limits between working and learning, or try to think how a parking can evolve into a camping, or how a parking can produce at least urban life. And for doing that, we already had the building, so we designed all the objects and all the subjects. We were lucky enough to have the help of character design Pia Castro de la Torre, which she designed. Every single person is different from the other. Every single person has something to say, and it has its group of its system of objects. So for us, it was a great chance to discuss contingency, of course, and we became mostly script writers, at least for a moment. But at the end, what we discovered was another material to build with. So this next project is the crystallization of that conversation. It's a new version of the elevated gardens I showed you a few slides ago. In this case, much deeper than the other. That's again another iteration of the ventilated or the permeable curtain wall. So behind that permeable curtain wall, behind that elevated garden, behind the glass, again, a big volume of air circulating from side to side and waiting for its occupation. The plan is very simple again. It's organized in strips. There is a technical one in the middle, gardens at the perimeter, and open space in between. The roughness of this construction changes radically when it's appropriated by its inhabitants. They can have a home like this, or a workplace like this one. So what is important here is that the furniture decrease the use. But for doing so, you have to offer open spaces. We as architects has to step back and let life and with all the surprises and contradiction to come inside our organizations. So this could be the typological evolution of the kind of building that Buenos Aires is made of. More permeable and more open to different uses. I think that the last two projects I want to share with you, they complement each other. Maybe I can resume the first one. I think it's driven by the idea of the naturalization of the city. And what I like about this picture that Javier Agustin Rojas took is that it describes the urban block that we work with. So it's clearly divided in two, and you can see how the evolution or the idea of housing evolved in Buenos Aires. So the left one is not ours. It's not bad, but not ours. It was when the idea of having a house in the city was related to compress the house itself, it's the whole iconography, and try to put squeeze the one house next to the other. The left case, which is ours, it accepts the whole density that the plot has to offer, but has to still work with the idea of having a house in contact with nature in the center of the city. This in front of a plaza. As you can see in this picture, there is a step back done by the trees. So the idea of the house is not in its iconography, but in the internal organization. I think that the section is a good document to explain that. It has two circulation, one over here, the other over there. In one case, you get inside to a very big room, the more public space of the apartment, and then you go down to the bedrooms and go up to your own garden. There is another kind of house that connects two patios and climbs up to the bedroom. So in one point, you once again use the sky and the views of the city, and the other one is more connected to the trees with the idea of having a patio next to the ground. The building is very systematic, but it takes the opportunity of the corner to create the entrance for the cars and for the people. That's the two circulation I described you before, the patios and the other one. When you get the patio, you have the barbecue, the kitchen, and the more continuity straight to the plaza. connected by an internal stair also to the parking. It's a very systematic and clear organization. And the other one, that's the connection to the patios, and that's what happened when you systematize them. The upper part of it has the bedrooms, and then it's coronated by this garden divided with very light elements that still give you the idea of sharing your roof with the treetops on top, on front of the house. That's the second project that it's complementary for us with the previous one, because I think it works with the idea of the urbanization of the landscape. We are doing the first block of a mixed-use, mid-density urbanization that maybe, hopefully, will become an alternative to the individual houses that literally destroy the periphery of Buenos Aires. Each building of this new complex, it's positioned in order to create a specific relation to the surrounding, a relation direct to the main plaza of the neighborhood, in relation to the lake, trying to twist the cars in order to save a public place next to the lake. So instead of thinking the block as a consolidated solid, we work with a group of buildings arranged in such a way that the central space can be open and accessible. So one building is for apartment, that's the one next to the lake. It's structured from its perimeter with structural elements, as you can see here, that organizes the kitchens, the barbecues, the bathrooms, and the fireplace, and leaving the rest of the perimeter open to the landscape. We have the chance to finish the first building of that block. It's a building that has commercial spaces in the ground floor, and it has also small workplace spaces wrapped in almost the same gardens we previously tried before, but in this time in a form of a pavilion having 4 sides to work with. So it's the same solution or the same architecture for the open corridor, and then it transforms into a balcony, an elevated garden, and connection again between these 2 sides. That's how it looks from the main plaza of the new city. So that's the upper circulation. You have no doors to get inside. It's just sliding panels, the same sliding panels that you have in the other part of the units. And the air can go from one place to the other, having the possibility of putting a garden next to it and connecting again to the landscape. So I would like to finish with a little intervention that we did with our friends BAU for the last Sao Paulo Biennial. So we were requested to do a site-specific installation inside the CESC 24 de Mayo that everybody knows. It's a beautiful, very beautiful and powerful building by Paulo Méndez da Rocha and MMBB. It is located in Sao Paulo, a very dense city. Well, Felipe, you know it very well. In this case, what is super important when it comes into your face, that you have a very close distance between a vertical public building and a vertical private building. So we, instead of doing our installation there, we decided to rent an apartment in front of it and build our installation in front, because the way you use this building is almost like the Guggenheim. You take the elevator and then go down through the ramp. So that's the window you have in your left when you leave the elevator. And you can see our installation if you pay attention, or you can go through it without seeing it. It's like ambient music. It depends of the volume of your perception. We took the whole dimension of the front window and divided into with 4 mirrors in a way that looks like a flip pyramid that reflects the sky, reflects the city fabric and the ground. That's the installation from the back. That's the infrastructure. But again, the elements I've been repeating again and again in this presentation: the sky, the street, and the city fabric, but most important, the individual that is reflected again over there. So I think this is a good image to leave the conversation open and end the lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Marcelo, for really a absolutely fascinating lecture and for quite a phenomenal body of work. I have to say, I knew your work before, but I had never heard you or Sebastián presented, and I'm even more impressed now than I was before once I hear you speak. So we'll open it up to questions in a second, but I wanted to maybe kick off the conversation with one specific question, which has to do with the notion of invention in architecture and where you have decided to focus that energy. And for me, one thing, there are many, of course, many references and many powerful alibis in a lot of your work. But I think the one that for me is most interesting is that you've chosen to occupy, sort of to put in many ways, the architectural emphasis on the negotiation between conditions of interiority and conditions of exteriority, right? So these spaces in between glass and mesh, or where sort of you're cutting out pieces or extending a canopy, become not only a way to define the form of the project, but they also become a viewing device so that they become the way that you experience the world through the project. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit more specifically about the potentiality of the envelope within your work, specifically the focus on that condition between interiority and exteriority, and what that entails for you.
But I think that taking care of the envelope of a building relates to the idea that the architecture can be a filter between the individual and the universe, because it puts the architecture in a in-between situation between two elements. What activates that place, which is not a filter, it's a place, I would like to call it that way, is these two elements. And it gives a lot of responsibility to the inhabitant, because you can, when you focus on that element, you are also able to use in your own design the other two elements that are not part of the element you design. So you also are taking care about the individual, and you also are making a description of the outside world. So when a building is that filters, it gives a lot of responsibility to the individual. So the individual can use that limit as a place and can customize it, can create a gradient of relation to the exterior, can decide which is the way to relate itself with the world. That's a tool that architecture gives to the individual. So we are all the time sharing responsibility with that part of the project, which is the inhabitant. And we also try to give a lot of freedom of how to display its system of elements, but that's another moment of the project. The important thing is that you can relate also or choose variables of the outside world. You can take care of a few things and forget about the others. For example, you can blur the existing landscape if it's not beautiful enough. You can use the air coming from one side of the other because of the orientation and because of the shadow you create in that special place. You can transform the weather with that filter. So for us, it's a way to relate things. I think the more important, or we like to focus ourselves in how architecture can put things in relation. So that part of the project for us is very, very important because of that.
Yeah, no, that's very clear, and that opens a lot of many other questions. But I'm gonna stop now, and maybe I'll ask Maria and Jose if they have any questions. I think also if people have questions, raise your hand, and we'll go in your virtual hand, please, because there are way too many screens to go through, and then we'll go question by question. So I think we have a question by Maria Patterson. So actually, let's start with Maria Gonzalez, and then we'll go to Maria Patterson.
Okay, no, yes, I would like to talk first, because I think my question, if it's a question, has a lot to do with what you were saying, Felipe. So first of all, thank you very much, Marcelo, for this amazing lecture. Super inspiring for our students and also for us. So I've been following your work for a long time, and I'm fascinated with two concepts, that you explained very good today. One is the depth, the depth that you create with all these layers made of different materials, densities. Also the nature becomes a layer. At the end, filters one after the other. And first we can think that it's just visual filters, but they are not. There are shadows, there are sound, atmospheric filters, I will call it, if I have to put a title. So I'm very interested on how these filters create different relations with the city, with the dense city you talk all the time about. Some of them are in the direction of interacting with it, and some of them are more in the direction of being isolated from it, this relation. And the second aspect is again another layer, that you used to describe in Spanish corteza superior, or in English we translated like last upper level, or the rooftops, or I don't know how to describe it exactly, but so it's again another relation with the city, that generates a new landscape in the city. And some of these relations are interesting for me because you're creating a new layer that is horizontal. No, when we talk about collective housing, we always think about the relation with the neighbors, the sharing space is always in vertical somehow, no? And this opens a lot of possibilities to be in relation with other buildings, no? In this horizontal plane, horizontal that is not really horizontal, no? So I don't know, what do you think? No, but I think that this crazy year of pandemic, that we're experiencing and evaluating all the time, our houses, our like the dwellings, and also the city, no, in some points. What do you think, no, that these two aspects or these in-between spaces maybe can modify, no, in a post-pandemic world, no, the city? Because I think right now it's going to be a must, no, a requirement for all the projects. So I think that we can call you kind of a pioneer on experiencing or trying or testing all these in-between spaces, no, in the upper level and in the vertical level. So how do you think this will evolve, no, in the future? Maybe it's a complicated question, no, but because it's an open one.
No, thank you, Maria, for the comment and for the question. It has a lot of notes, a lot of elements I will try to put together. But let me start from the end of your question. I think that a lot of cities are now living an exodus of people that like saying, okay, I'm over, back to the nature. I don't want to be isolated in an apartment. If I can go, I mean, if the house is not the theater, not the cafe, not my friends, I want to be isolated with nature, right? So the city, it's going to reinvent itself to offer something new, and because we all, if we have the chance, which is not very easy, at least in South America and everywhere it's not easy, but if you have the chance, you will try to add some leisure, some new idea of luxury to the place you live. So for us, it was mandatory to redescribe the idea of luxury, right? That is not going to be linked to expensive materials and or big places, but maybe you can find it in such places that were hidden as the infrastructure leftovers of the roofs. So it's impossible that when that the roof are always a place that you can connect with the weather. You can see that you can have the distance. You can see the city fabric as an artificial topography. It's a place that the water tanks and the air conditioner machine are having such a nice life living there, and we are under that. So try to discover these new places in one hand, that's related to one part of your question, and then trying to at least play with light and temperature, with those in between elements, by creating different type of rooms, but not because in one room is dedicated to one thing, to do one thing, and the other room is for something else. You're offering different rooms with different climates and different connection in this different relation to the exterior. So maybe in those different temperatures or climates or way to put your objects around, and maybe trying to find new places that are hidden, but that nobody knows that already exist, but describe them in a new way. I think that the presentation was too long, but there was one missing project that is the Murere houses that actually is in the poster of this lecture. So we try to transform those plots into social housing, and we are working seriously with that idea in Universidad de La Matanza. It's a new public university just outside Buenos Aires. So in a way, for an architect, it's very important to create new words that let you describe the environment in a new way. And by describing that in a new way, a new project can arise. So that's the way to make evolve things, and that's why question like this and moment like this conversation are so important for us, because that the very difficult way to put everything in words lets you create another way to talk and then to have project and to build. It's very important.
Thank you so much for the responses, Marcelo, and again for the lecture. It was truly amazing. I just want to echo Maria and Felipe, just saying that I also have been seeing your work for so long and had never actually heard you present, and I found myself awed by so many of the projects. Really incredible. I'm going to start bringing people, students and others, into the conversation, and there's already a few raised hands and questions. But I guess the one comment I wanted to make is that I found really interesting, maybe this connects to both Maria and Felipe's question, that your practice is extremely precise about its use of materiality, about its use of materials, and that the materials seem to, in many ways, try to generate layered effects, like Maria was suggesting, which of course goes into transparency and translucency. But there's also, again, that the reflectivity that you use so much with these shiny materials, and even with mirrors, like we saw in this last project of Sao Paulo, that I just found extremely compelling, because it's also that opportunity that Felipe was bringing up about how to innovate. I think in a way, this is how the practice is doing it. So this is truly just more a comment, unless you wanted to elaborate on materiality. But I just found that really beautiful and fantastic. And it goes also alongside with something that I picked up from the presentation, which is the remarkable photographic work that you've shown, which begged the question that I want to ask you, if those are your photographs, or if you work alongside a photographer all the time, because it seems that the photography and the architecture are somehow completely enmeshed with one another.
Thank you, Jose. Well, some of the pictures are ours, and some other are done by different photographers. The last project, all of them are, the pictures are from Javier Agustín Rojas. But for us, having a point of view, it's a very important moment. So it doesn't matter who does the click on the camera, because at the end, what is important is that when you go every week at least to the working to the site and to see how the building grows and try to watch it, you put yourself and try to know where, from which point of view it all makes sense. It relates to the photography in one hand, but at the same time, it's how to see the discipline also from another point of view. So for us, it's very important to talk about that, because that is a way to describe reality. And materials are such an important or efficient tool to perception. Our project, most of them, or at least the one I choose to present today, are kind of shiny and metallic and reflective, as you mentioned, but it doesn't all the time make sense with its construction. Sometimes it has to do with the last inch of the project. So the idea of the perception and the effects of the material more than its trueness, for us, it has to do a lot with the construction of the point of view and how to manipulate or create a reality that maybe change radically when you move yourself. So if you change the point of view, the whole composition, it's different.
That's a fantastic answer. Thanks, Marcelo. And I think it ties also into the Chicago Biennial project where you talked about design. The architect is a designer of not just objects and buildings, but also subjects and that subjectivity of the individual. So from what I'm seeing in the chat, we have first Maria Pattison, then Angel Firmalino, Kennedy Carter, and Sophie Depret all lined up for questions. So Maria, why don't you start?
Hi, I just wanted to say first off, thank you so much for coming and lecturing. It was super informative and I really loved everything that you talked about and that you showed. And specifically, actually, Jose just mentioned it, but the Chicago project, I was really struck by the fact that you designed each individual character that you put in the model, and you went so far as to work with an actual character designer, and it really you used the term, you felt like script writers, which was really interesting to me because it brought up this idea of like architecture as a form of storytelling. And so I just wanted to ask if you could sort of elaborate on the process behind, you know, developing all of those characters and how you even decided to place so much importance on each individual resident within that model.
Okay. Thank you, Maria, for the question also. I mean, as architect, we do project, but also we are inhabiting places, right? And we are the same person that do both, right? So the idea of if we are all the time creating scenarios as architect and leaving the responsibility to finish the space and inhabit to the people who use the building, we wanted to translate what we do in our day by day, like when we also inhabit buildings, but translate it into a model, which is an architectural tool, right? We are lucky enough that my wife is the character design. It's not easy to you never have the money to do that in other way. That was fascinating for us for the first time. I have to say that we never been to Chicago. We never had the chance to go to Chicago. The biennial was the first time there. And of course, we never been to John Hancock. So we really have a lot of fun in trying to imagine ourselves with total freedom, with those very clear, the Hancock building has the same few rules and very clear ones that we want to translate to the project. We try to work with very few rules, right? And the Hancock has maybe 2 of them. So when you can explain yourself those rules, you can play the game, right? And inhabiting can be very exhausting. Yes, it was very exhausting to complete that, to change from a dweller to people who drive a car. But it was a beautiful moment in the studio. You can imagine that everyone was with the scissors, cutting elements, printing them, and creating situation. So for us, was very important that project to realize that the way you inhabit can be also a material for designing. it was very important, that experience, to really measure what we are lefting over.
Thank you again, Marcelo. Angel, why don't you go ahead now?
Hi, Angel.
Hi, it's good to
Nice
see
to see you.
Yeah, this is an unfortunate reunion. I think the last time we saw each other, we said we won't see each other on Zoom, but
Yeah.
we're here again.
It could
But
be
yeah,
worse.
it could be worse.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be. I think there's a light at the end of the tunnel. But it's always a treat to hear you and Sebastian speak about your work. And I'm really glad that you're here tonight.
Thank you.
So what I find super delightful in your work, and maybe this speaks to Felipe's comment about the invention in your work, is that there's a kind of generative quality in your work from what I see as a deliberate combination of seemingly contradictory elements. So like the idea of domesticity and density, or structure and program specificity, working with existing and new, or nature and a building envelope. And I think from having the privilege of working closely with you and Sebastian, I was wondering if you can maybe speak to the idea of calibration in your work, and that as potentially an alternative to typology. And as you think of your agency as an architect, I know that it seems like a lot of the labor that goes into the way you make decisions is in those calibrating moments.
Well, I don't know what you are referring to in calibration, but I think that you are focusing in how to relate to very different situations, or try to deal with different situations and carry up a solution that maybe describe the situation in a different way. I don't know if for you calibration is something like that, but from our point of view, the practice of architecture, of constructing buildings, has to deal with very different agents, right? And for doing that, you have to maybe try to select what battle you want to go, and by doing so, try to concentrate and be as precise as you can. But it's important to say also, because we are in front of a lot of students, that calibration, it's a selected battle. It's an area that you describe and try to work with, but you are getting away, or you're living outside that area a lot of things. So the idea of calibration for us is not like having everything under control. That could be a very exhausting way to practice. The idea of calibration, it's for us, is like trying to set the question correctly, and try to set the project into those questions. In that sense, everything makes sense, right? But it's important to know that it's a very rhetoric description. That's a message I would like to share, because once you change the point of view, the calibration maybe disappears.
Yeah, I think this maybe calibration isn't the right word, but I think I'm just trying to find a way of articulating the kind of generative quality in that deja vu-ness of your work, even though we see the structural grid that's kind of pushed and pulled in very deliberate ways that create the difference between hallway, garden, screen, and or pulling it all the way to the core. And I think that's something I really enjoy seeing in your plans and in your drawings.
Thank you. So those are the elements we are working with, and we are lucky enough that we are not the first architects in the world that are choosing those elements. That means that you have a beautiful and an enormous constellation of options, and maybe doing a project can be like trying to inhabit that constellation of different opportunities or design techniques I described earlier. Because the topics you are mentioning are recurrent in a lot of practices, and for us it's very important to have a practice that can be fed by those experiences, but try to at the same time give something back to the same community that it nutriates from, right? So I think the synthesis, of working in a few elements, it's a good way to concentrate and give something back also.
I think we can move to Kennedy, and then Stephen, and then Sophie.
Marcelo, I will just reiterate by saying I am extremely impressed by your beautiful work.
Thank you.
One that really strikes me is kind of the vertical garden tower. I think it was in Buenos Aires. It was a beautiful building, and it was something that a way of living that I have never seen before. And so my question to you is if you had a specific demographic in mind when creating that, whether it be families, students, individuals living in them.
Well, the story behind that building is that it was built by 3 people that they are not actually developers. They tried to, the 3 friends that wanted to avoid to putting the money in the bank and put it in a building. That's another story of Buenos Aires life. But there is a CCA exhibition going on about that. That you can, if you want to know more about that. But the important thing is that they didn't knew if they wanted to create like a temporary hotel like Airbnb, because it is in a very touristic area. The other one had an idea about creating offices for audiovisual industry, because the site has some tax good exceptions or something like that. And the other said, let's do houses because it works all the time, right? And what we did is to tell them that it doesn't matter in that size of building. You don't have to decide that, because what the building only has like well, let me translate, or help me to translate, like 60 square meter to 40 square meter units that are very small. It doesn't matter exactly, but there are so small units that finally the furniture can define the use of it. So we try to leave it open the most that we can, but at the end, what the kind of demographic that actually lives and use that building, it's a group of mostly young people. There are offices and there are houses, and there are both, because I'm in my house right now, so clearly that definition doesn't matter anymore. But it is in an expensive place of Buenos Aires. Nowadays, we open a little office in Montevideo, in Uruguay. It's across Rio de la Plata. and we are starting to work in a little building, almost the same size of this one, under social housing laws. And Uruguay has very great access to houses. It has credits. It has a lot of things that Buenos Aires and Argentina doesn't. But what I want to go after that is that maybe in that building can access to different people, different families, but the building is exactly the same. You know, so at the end, architecture never knows who or what is going to happen inside, because we know at the same time that one neighborhood is very expensive and the second after it's very cheap and the whole neighborhood changes. So architecture have to resist that. So we try to have in mind for who are we doing that project, but in the back of our heads, we try to leave that definition as open as possible.
Thank you, Marcelo. I'd love to invite Sophie now, if you can ask your question out loud. If not, I can read it also.
Yeah, I was really interested about how you maintain visual privacy for the individual, considering how much glass I saw in your work, and even when you added like screening in front of those glass layers in order to create, you know, layers of privacy from like crime to keep it safe. So I was wondering if you could just talk about the visual privacy and how you negotiated that.
Okay. Well, depending of the site, the relation between the individual and the site changes, and that is how that space that filters both worlds works. But most important of that relation is that the building it's accumulation of individual decision. That grid that repeats all the time the element, if you look it from the outside, it's not homogeneous. The building is not the repetition of one unit or one individual or one family. And that strict geometry, it's related or it's distorted by two things. One, the trees. If you visit Buenos Aires, you will realize that the trees are a very big help for architects, because you only see buildings through trees, right? Very, very, very tall. So the second is that if you create those filters and you invite to move the screen, to add vegetation, to use your personal object over there and being filtered, it all participate with the formal image of the building. So having that element in such a strict order, it's for us only interesting because it's attacked from the inside and through the inside, from the outside, sorry. And the whole image of that continuity modified by these two factors gives an image of democracy in a way, because you're having like a few rules and some space for freedom and perception. For us, it also is not just an aesthetic that we feel close to, but at the same time create an image of a society that we would like to live in, you know, where you have some rules that are not quite strict and you have freedom to move. That's very important for us.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Stephen.
All right, thank you. So as we're studying in our, oh, by the way, great lecture. I really appreciated seeing how the materials sort of could do that interplay between inside and outside. And one thing we're focusing on in our case study right now is sort of how over time projects develop and change. And so specifically for the one I'm focusing on, there's a semi-public area that can be like open and closed, that can become sort of permeable based on the inhabitants. And so that reminded me, or during your lecture, I was reminded of that when we were talking about meshes and opening and closing of windows and walls. And so I was just curious about, especially because for my case study right now, it's not even built yet, but some that have been built, like Quinta Moya, you can see how it's been sort of used over a long time. So I was curious if there's been anything interesting or surprising, or any lessons or takeaways that you've had looking back at the projects that have been finished over time, especially in relation to sort of you're trying to articulate an ideal, or you're trying to articulate the vision, but then there's also the practical application of how do people who move in and use it, like you're saying, you're leaving the middle open or the interior open, and but still you're having a really interesting sort of dynamic that can be changed by the inhabitant between the dwelling and the street, and between different dwellings. So I was curious if you had any like lessons or takeaways from experimenting with that.
Okay. Well, we try when we go back to the buildings to do in photograph once in a while. We have the fortune to most of the time leave friends living there because they can get to an apartment very cheaper because they become the constructor of that units. That's the something about the fideicomiso that Felipe were talking about, and follow the CCA things of Buenos Aires going on nowadays, the Canadian Center for Architecture for that matter. The important thing is that well, I'm also talking to you from one of those buildings I'll show you. Our studio is in another one, and Sebastián lives, my partner lives in another. So we really use those buildings and really see what happens to other people. I mean, the most exciting thing is that my neighbors every morning starts at 6 a.m. doing online classes of SHIM in the same room that I have my table dinner, right? And the space is the same, but when she calls me once in a while because something is not functioning very well, I get inside and I cannot believe what is happening inside. That's and the architecture and the city can put together a lot of different things. I don't know nothing to do with her, but I'm fascinated about how the same space can give or arise the individual's obsessions. If architecture can be the place for your individual obsessions, a big freedom arises. And I mean, also the good thing about inhabiting and trying to insist with the same things in 15 years now is that you can learn from them, from the mistake. I thought that this was going to be in that way, and it didn't happen, or that kind of flexibility, it didn't work at the end. So, well, you try to improve by experiencing and by insisting at the same time, and also by inhabiting.
Yeah, thank you, Marcelo, for that answer. And I think one thing that's evident to me is that I still cannot find a good word to translate fideicomiso de propiedad horizontal, by the way. Joint freehold trust is the closest thing that I've found. But one thing that I'm always sort of very sort of taken by the fideicomiso is that it actually produces a scale of domestic life that is quite pleasant. right? It doesn't work at scales much bigger than a single building, right? Once you do it, you move into a different type of development. And I think for me, it's fascinating in the way that you've taken this legal and financial tool to transform the world of domestic space. That for me is fascinating in your work. I told you UVA students asked a lot of questions. I warned you about this. So maybe we have time for just one last question. If there's somebody that wants to ask a question. Going once, going twice. No, I think we've run out of questions, but Marcelo, thank you so much. We owe you a visit in person. It would be great to have you for a longer time at UVA, because you have definitely material for like 50 lectures in your body of work. So I'm sure we will connect again soon, and hopefully we'll have you here in the near future.
Thank you, Felipe. It was a real pleasure. Thank you for the invitation and your attention.
Great.
Thank you, Marcelo. Congrats on the amazing work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marcelo.
Bye. Thank you very much.